Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Levi Orero. I work with the World Agroforestry Center, and I'll be your host today at this time, working with Lisa, Victoria, Langat, Kanel, Ruben, and Irene. And we'll just, I'll just go to the next slide, and I'd like everyone to feel welcome during this presentation. And I'm also very happy to be here. So there are a few ground rules that we'll set during the session. So for your audio, please remain muted unless speaking to reduce background noise. Also limit turning your camera off and on as much as possible. And there's a designated tech support person on the hosting team. So if you need any assistance, please message in the chat. These sessions will also be recorded. So if you would not like to be recorded, please turn off your video. So let's get started. So I'd like us to introduce ourselves in the chat. Please share your name, your pronouns, location, and if applicable, the acknowledgement of the traditional owners of the land that you're currently on. So we have Jess. Hi, Jess. We have Adam. We have me, I'm from Netherlands. We have Brian. We have Eleanor. We have Adam from Antigonish. We have God. Hi, God. Good to see you. We have Jess from Canada. Also good to see you. We have Allison, who will be in the background supporting. Thank you so much, Allison. We have Nathan. We have Dee. We have Mary Washira from Nairobi, Kenya. We have Kanel. There's Andy. There's Steve. Welcome to this session. Thank you so much for being here. We have Lamia in the UK with roots in Pakistan. Happy to welcome you here. Thank you so much for joining. There's Janice from France, Courtney, welcome. So we'll just start in the next 2 minutes while other people join during the process, which so happy to see you today. I have members from my team who can also turn their screens on and just say hi. I see Lisa. Hi, Lisa.
Hi.
I also saw Langat, Kanel.
Hello.
We also see Bunny, welcome. We see Melissa, welcome. Thank you. So we have 27 people so far. I think we'll just start in the next 1 minute. Thank you so much for identifying yourself in the chat box. Welcome. This will be, we'll have a presentation for about around 10 minutes, and then I'll welcome any questions that you might have, and the team will be happy to answer that. So thank you. So for those who don't know me, I'll just go back to my starting screen. So the title of this session is Collecting, Analyzing, and Giving Back Community Data in an ABCD Way. My name is Levi Orero. I work with the World Agroforestry Center. I'm being assisted by Lisa, who also works at the World Agroforestry Center, and we are part of a ABCD team that includes Victoria, Langat, Canel, Ruben, and Irene. So thank you so much for being here. So I'll just start with it's already 5 minutes past, so I'll just start with the presentation. So in a world where institutions collect and effectively take away data, because most of what we see is people going into the communities, asking questions in their questionnaires, and they take that data away and they go do analysis on that data, and they share it either through reports or through published papers. So the question is, how can ABCD principles only rise above that noise and truly connect with community members? How do we do this differently? How do we make sure that this data that is being collected can be given back and create impact and also contribute to the development and the agency of the community? So what was our challenge? So how do we give back this data? Because we are dealing with communities with different culture, different educational backgrounds. How do we give back this data in a way that is useful to these individuals? So as I've said, like once research is done, once data is collected, many communities never see the enumerators again. They collect the data, they give away their data. Most of the time, as the norm usually is that they give consent, but most of these people do not give back this data. So these communities do not get to hear and discuss the data, what was done to the data and the analysis that was done to the data. So whether the data analysis is useful to them has never been really explored, because they have to understand and they have to see how this data is useful to them. So they usually meet narratives out there that a certain community in a certain place is like this, but they were not part of it. They just gave away their data, but they didn't realize how it was used and how it's been presented. So I'll just give a brief introduction of who we are. So we are part of the C4 ICRAF, also called World Agroforestry. And since 2015, the ABCD team has worked on several projects in Kenya. So using ABCD, which is asset-based community development, we've been able to continually test and refine our methodologies with several partners, including the Coady Institute. So our approach before, for example, one of the core tools that is used in ABCDs, especially in economic analysis, is the leaky bucket. So we used to collect leaky bucket data from our communities, and then we'd analyze it at an aggregated level. So we'd give summaries on which farmer performed the best, what was the average income, what was the average expense, how much is going into the community, how much is going out, which economic activities are the main economic activities. So we'd analyze this at an aggregated level and even compare, let's say, the average income of men versus women, and also different community groups that we work with. And then we included this in our reports and publication. But our question was always, we had an idea on how to make this data more useful. How can we make it more useful to the communities? And then we realized that we have to find a way of giving it back to the community, so that the insights that we get just don't stay with us or to the wider world, but go back to these communities so that they understand how the data is useful to them. So we met the community and asked them, so what are you really interested in your data? We collected a lot of data from you, but what are you really interested in? What would you like to see given back to you from the data that you shared? So they spoke about they'd like to see how much money they made during a year, how much they spent, also look at how they performed compared to to the other groups within the community. So one of the things that we decided to do was give a preliminary report, which would give us an idea of how they took it and how they understood what we shared to them. So the version that we shared at the beginning was from a scientific point of view. So it was mostly just tables and information and notes. So they were very curious, by the way, and they were very excited to see that. And then we asked them, okay, how can we make this better? Because so some of the comments that came out during what we call the data feedback session was, can we see more visualization? Maybe how can I see my progress also over time? Because it's one thing to have a table, but it's another thing to have a bar graph or a line graph. It strikes the eye and it gives more information. So we gave the first version of the report. We held the first data feedback session, and then their feedback from them was that we need to include more visualizations. We need to compare several years and and provide more information for them to have a clearer picture of how they've been performing. So this is the slide that you're seeing is an example of what we came with. That is the current version and the final version. So we had an individual leaky bucket report, which was for 1 year, like for example, 2020, which would basically give the details of the farmer, and then also give the personal profile, and then also give on-farm and off-farm cash flows, so that they understand, if I consider my household both from the farm and all the money that I'm getting outside the farm, how have I performed over time? And then we also looked at, out of those, which was the main source of income for me, and then which was the main expense for me. And then once they have that, they can also compare that to other people. So in terms of my group or commodity group, how did I perform compared to other people? So we noticed that this improvement to the initial report was taken well, especially because they could now see more. They could now relate to the data that we were giving back. They could see and give comments and realize, oh, this is why I spend this much. This is why I need to create or generate more income. So based on these simple visualizations, we were able now to help them understand that this data is still, it belongs to you, and you, anytime you are interested in getting it, you can get it. So we had a presentation last year. One of our thinking has always been, okay, this is a report. A report is a static way of presenting information. How do we make it more dynamic? How do we, because the leaky bucket in this case gives a snapshot of the cash flows within a farm for a year. So how do we make it more dynamic? How do we make or allow these farmers a way to keep track of daily records without having to use paper, especially for those who are able to use technology. So we have started working on this application called the Farm Leaky Bucket that is still under development, but we've made progress in terms of the features of the application. And it's been a very interesting learning curve, because we've realized that when you are while you're developing this, you really need to get the developer and the scientist and the farmer on the same page, so that they understand that whatever you're giving them is important to them, and they also see the value that you're offering them. So while we have the paper reports like currently shared to the farmers, we're also working on seeing how to make these dashboards that will be generated from this application. So that has been an interesting way to do it. And then, so why do we share this data? So we'd like to support community to contextualize the results. So when we are giving them these results, they need to understand, because we are coming from a perspective of scientists who might have more technical knowledge, but we also need to express it in a way that makes sense to them and help them think about what does this data mean, and also inspire them to achieve their goals, and then help them support their setting up of an action plan. Because if you can allow them identify their strengths, which they'll be able, for example, if they realize they make more money maybe from growing tomatoes, so that is one of their strengths, then they can identify and pursue that as one of the opportunities. Or if they can compare with their friends, they can realize, okay, I spent a lot of money in, let's say, maize, but I didn't make as much back. So they start to think from a mathematical or a business way of thinking, which is a good thing, because now they'll be able to make more intentional decisions in terms of how they operate their farm and also how they operate their household. So we went back again and asked them, so what was interesting from the reports? And they gave very, every farmer had a different thing that stood out for them. So for example, there are farmers who said that the on-farm data column was important to them, especially because it's in a community where most people make their money off farm produce. Others saw it very interesting to compare income and expenditure, because once you see the bigger picture of how much is coming in, how much is going out, you are able to make more intentional decisions. So one farmer said it was interesting to see the fluctuations over time and remembered which events had affected her on-farm and off-farm activities over the year. So when comparing over time, they're able to see, okay, the reason why I made less money here was because of this and this. So that was also really good to see. And then another farmer says, what makes me happy from this report is that I'm making progress, because once they are able to see the changes over time, once they see the line graph changing over time, that means something is happening on the farm, and they can be able to pinpoint and understand why that's happening. What was surprising to them, they found the data analysis and presentation interesting, because they are used to just giving raw data, but now it came back in a format that was more deductive and more summarized, which made sense to them. And then they were also surprised that a lot of income came from activities they considered minor. So one farmer said, this report informs us that we have gaps in our daily or weekly income, and they only concentrate on, they should concentrate on crops that maybe make them money, let's say after 3 months or after 6 months, instead of the annual crops. And we also had interesting insights in terms of gender dynamics from our focus group discussions. So once they were able to share these reports with their families, share the leaky bucket results with their families, we noticed that from their comments, there was increased independence, which is, let's say, women being less independent of their men, especially because they were able to see which income generating activities worked best for them. And then also there was increased transparency, there was more trust between couples, there was reduced conflict between couples, there was a lot of inclusion in decision making, especially for the women and children, because children were able also to look at their parents or farm reports and try to give ideas and also share what they thought. We've been working on ABCD, and we've been working on different projects, and these are some of the resources. So we are currently working on a scientific paper to just summarize the process and the learnings from this sharing data with these communities. And it has been a very interesting journey, because we've been able to mobilize these communities to understand their strengths and also see how they are valuable and within the community. So thank you so much. I think that's the end of my presentation. I'd like to invite any questions, and I'd like to also hand over to Lisa for any comments. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Levi. Perhaps just to make like 2-3 small additions. As Levi said, we are the ABCD team from World Agroforestry. So this is a research organization with headquarters in Kenya, but we have offices around the world, I think in 40 countries, if I'm not mistaken. And a lot of the ABCD work that we have been doing has focused on Kenya and has developed over time through partnerships with Cody and others, and many of you on the call as well. So just like 2 brief additions, I think, to Levi's presentation. And I wrote like 1 comment already in the chat box. So what we did, and I think like Levi, I'm not sure whether Levi like explained that, but there's the leaky bucket tool that we all know. And then within our practice, we decided to adapt that to the household level. So, and for the household level, it has 2 components. It has an on-farm component and it has an off-farm component that we then bring together as the integrated household leaky bucket. And we have through Cody a publication on that as well. So I just briefly wanted to explain that. And we actually use that since 2015 in one of our projects and have been collecting data up to this year. And we've been doing this. The initial intention was more to test the tool. It wasn't so much about scientific accuracy, which is something that is, we are gappers also within our own institution, let me just say it like that. So it wasn't necessarily about the scientific accuracy of the data we are collecting, because we're collecting the data annually. So it means recall periods of 1 year. So the core interest that we had in that was really to stipulate reflection. And that is like something that we have seen a lot, that the household leaky bucket format and the way in which we collect the data on an annual basis. And we always have 2 days. We have a first day where the team comes and trains again on the tool, if you will, like repeats how the tool goes. Then people go home and prepare the household leaky bucket in the household, and then they come back for submission and discussion section. So we have witnessed that it really leads to increased conversations at the household level, which has had very interesting results, especially also in terms of gender dynamics, etc. So that was an initial objective of having that tool in the first place. And then the second objective, I think, was also that we really want to encourage record keeping, because that is something that came out like throughout our work with ABCD, that record keeping is incredibly important. And then, like as Levi said, the idea of giving back the data literally came later, because we noticed like we're really amassing a lot of data and it's not fair that we have all this data. And we started reflecting. So like what you're seeing is really like, it has been experimental. This is not something that we planned on doing at all. But then like the idea really came that since we have been collecting this data for so long, actually it is really interesting. And also in terms of comparisons. And Levi, could I briefly share my screen? And I'm mindful of the fact that our session is almost ending, but I briefly wanted to show the fact that then later we use the same data and we prepared these multi-year reports. Yeah, can you see this? Oh, sorry, this is the leaky bucket one. So then we started preparing the multi-year reports, which Levi showed you the 1 year reports, and this is now the multi-year reports, where we have the totals, we have the individual section, individual data section, we have the section on showing where most of the on-farm and off-farm expenditure and income is coming from. We have the main crops over the year. So the idea really is to give the data back and help people reflect on, oh, what happened exactly. So we had these sessions where we discussed the data and we're like, okay, so do you remember what happened? Like, what did you do differently? How can it inspire what you want to do in future? And then, as Levi said as well, people really get motivated. And it's something they told us. They get motivated by the idea of seeing comparative analysis. So we have this initial personalized section that is fully different for everybody, and it's completely private. We give them over to people in envelopes. There's no sharing of these. But then there's the comparative section that looks at different commodity groups, because we had trained them in different commodity groups, and also men and women, and also different regions, etc. And then there's a section on what to do with the data and how to learn from it. And the second thing we did as well was that we did a VSLA analysis, because we also do the VSLA, the voluntary savings and loaning. And people also really asked for whether we could share how they have grown, how they have changed over time. So just to emphasize also this importance of when we are in a space and we do certain things to be responsive to requests and things that are coming up. Yeah, that was my addition. We have 5 more minutes. Levi, I'm giving it back to you.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. I think we have quite a number of questions or comments on the chat. I think we can address some of them while trying to keep track of time. So let's see.
Perhaps we can invite someone to just speak up. We literally, I assume, have like time for 1 or 2 questions only.
Yeah.
Or input, of course, as well. Like always interested in input and discussion.
Okay. There's one that has come online before I give someone who can speak. So how do they explain these graphs to their community members? So do you simplify this further so that it feels more community-based and organic? I think I'll take that. So during the feedback sessions, we are able to go through the report section by section and really explain what it means, because we understand that not everybody will understand immediately what the report means, but during the consultations with them and during the focus group discussions, we are able to explain, and we are able also to encourage other farmers within the session to explain to the rest, especially in instances where they need to make explanations using the local languages. So yes. Any other question?
And perhaps also a small addition. So our initial report format was really very, it wasn't very like just graphs. It was just tables. It was extremely inaccessible. It was really not like very well thought through. But as I said, it was an experimental thing. But then also people told us like, you have to include definitions. You have to write on the report what that means. So we have a lot of these sections where it says gross income means this. So there's a lot of explanatory text as well, but very brief.
Thanks, Lisa. Anyone who would like to ask a question, please raise your hand. Or a comment. Doesn't have to be a question. Could be a comment.
Let me just very briefly take the last question. Hi, God.
Hi.
Let me not respond. Let me give the floor to God.
No, just I mean, we could go on for hours with this. It's amazing, and I really appreciate a couple of Steve's points that he made in the chat around urban versus sort of this rural and agricultural setting. In particular, I guess my question is, with these individual reports you're able to generate. Bernie's already asked the question about how they're shared with community members, but do the individuals themselves need some help in understanding how to use them? Like, you must do some kind of orientation to those reports so that they can actually make use of them and use them as decision-making tools.
Let me like briefly take this. I think that Levi just explained that during the data feedback sessions, we have these explanations and we have the text that is on the forms. But it's true, we should actually look at, just having a brief video or something online. We actually spoke about this. And I think the second part of the answer is still the Leaky Bucket app. As you know, it has been in development for so long. We have faced so much trouble. We never thought it would take that long. We faced so much trouble. But the idea of the app is, a bit like also going back to the urban setting and perhaps also going back to a setting that is perhaps more northern, if you will. The idea is to have these like dashboards that are similar to what you can find from your bank. And this is like specifically on this economics tool. I saw someone's question here as well, and it's definitely possible to adapt the tool to look at other things. That's the beauty of the Leaky Bucket, right? That the Leaky Bucket can do just about anything that we want to give it content for. But in the context of the Leaky Bucket app, the idea is that people are able to select the things that they want to see on their dashboards, and also the degree of detail and the degree of abstraction, if you will. But yeah, since it is a very variable thing that we're looking at, it's taking longer than we thought. I'm wondering whether we have to close. Levi D, I'm not sure.
We have 1 minute. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for attending this session. In case there are any questions, I think we'll share our email addresses so that you can.
And you will know how to find us, Levi. They know how to find us by now.
They know how to.
I think they do.
Yeah. So
thank you all so much for your interest.